ancestor of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Either she is literally the daughter, which means either Shem had her at a very old, ripe age, or Tamar was very old herself. But was evil, and Hashem caused him to die. Then Yehudah said to his second son, Onan, take your brother's wife, enter into a levirate marriage with her. If your brother doesn't have a child, then you have to marry his widow, so that the brother's soul can come into the body that you will provide, and you give your brother another chance to live. However, Onan knew that the baby will have the soul of his brother, and therefore he didn't want to impregnate his wife, and he would let his seed to go to waste to the ground. What he did was evil in the eyes of Hashem, and God caused him to die also. From the word also we see that the reason why died was for the same sin. Now, verse 11. Yehudah then said to Tamar, remain a widow, because my son Shelah is still young. Wait until he grows up, and he'll enter a levirate marriage with you. But the Torah tells us that he really didn't want him to marry Tamar, because he didn't know that his sons were evil. So he thought, what a coincidence that two of my sons die from the same woman. Maybe she somehow causes them to die. And he said, I don't want my third son Shelah to marry her, because maybe he'll die also, God forbid. So he tricked her, said, wait. But he really didn't have an intention to allow Shelah to marry her. Verse 12. Many days passed, a few years passed since then, and his wife died. And Yehudah decided to go check on his shepherds. Page 211. And Tamar was told, behold, your father-in-law is coming up to our vicinity. And Tamar thought to herself, Shelah is growing up, and Yehudah is not fulfilling his promise, but I want a baby. And Tamar had a prophecy that she will have a baby from Yehudah's family. So first she thought it's going to be from his first son. Didn't work out. Okay, maybe from the second son. Didn't work out. So she's waiting for the third son, because she knows the prophecy that she will have a child from Yehudah's family. Third son is also not working out. So she said, maybe it means that I'm going to become pregnant from Yehudah himself. So she covered herself with a veil. She sat by the crossroads, and she was waiting for Yehudah. And she will try to seduce him to become pregnant from him. When Yehudah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot. So he went to her and he said, if you please, let me consort with you. And this is an unusual behavior for Yehudah, for a great man. So our sages say that it was Satan sent directly by God to change the course of events. Yehudah himself would never do such a thing, because this was wrong. But God knew that this is the right thing. Hashem knew that Yehudah and Tamar are supposed to have a child that will eventually bring Mashiach. And he said, I have to help Yehuda do the right thing, even though he thinks it's a wrong thing. So basically, Hashem created a test for Yehuda that he could not pass. Satan himself came and pushed Yehuda towards Tamar. And Tamar said, if you provide me with a pledge until you send me a payment. So he said, what is the pledge? What is the collateral? And she said, leave three of your personal items. Your ring with which you seal letters, your wrap, the garment that you wrap yourself in, our sages say this was talit, and your staff that is in your hand. 3 things that identify Yehuda specifically. And she conceived from him. She went back and pretended as if nothing happened, and Yehuda didn't know. However, on page 213, after 3 months passed, Yehuda was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar committed harlotry because she's pregnant and she doesn't have a husband. Yehuda said, take her out and let her be burned. She is the daughter of a high priest of Melchizedek of Shem. She has a higher status. She's my daughter-in-law, and I am the leader of the large family of Yaakov. This is not proper what she's doing. So he made her, he signed the death penalty for her. However, as she was taken out, she sent word to her father-in-law. She sent message to him. Identify, if you please, whose are this ring, this wrap, and this staff. And Yehuda recognized. And he admitted. He said, she is right. The baby is from me. And she was saved. And when the time came, she had twins in her womb. The first one was called Peretz. And the second one was called Zerach. And now, chapter 39, we go back to the story of Yosef. What happened to Yosef in Egypt? Yosef had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, the minister of Paro, a prominent Egyptian, purchased him from the Ishmaelites. Page 215, verse 2. Hashem was with Yosef, and he became a successful man. His master perceived that Hashem was with him, and whatever he did, Hashem made succeed in his hand. Yosef found favor in his eyes. Now, Hashem is with him, but wherever there is success, there is test. And the test is happening. Verse 5. And it happened that from the time he appointed him in his house and over whatever he had, Hashem blessed the Egyptian and his household on Joseph's account. Verse 7. After these things, his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. She desired him, and she said, lie with me. But he adamantly refused. And as much as she tried to seduce him, she was not successful. Until she found an opportunity when there was no man in the house, and now we're on page 217, verse 12, that she caught hold of Yosef by his garment, saying, lie with me. And even though there was no one in the household, they were alone, and she grabbed him. Yosef could have said, oh, I'm being forced, it's not my fault, and plus I want it anyway, I'm 17, 18-year-old boy. I have hormones also. And not only that, I'm a slave. She's my mistress. She's my master's wife. Not only she can hurt me or even kill me, but on the other hand, she can save me. Maybe if I listen to her, she'll free me. So there was so much on his mind. But he left his garment in her hand and he fled and went outside. Even though he would remain a slave, even though she might hurt him, he was strong. And when she saw that he ran away, she called out to the men of her household and said, "Look, my husband brought us this Hebrew man to play with us. He came to lie with me. But I called with a loud scream, and he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside. Catch him." So she kept the garment next to her until her husband came. Verse 19. When his master heard his wife's words, his anger flared up. Yosef's master took him and placed him in the prison. Verse 21, Hashem was with Yosef even in prison, and he endowed him with charisma, and he put his favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And the prison warden placed all the inmates of the prison in Yosef's custody. And whatever Yosef did, Hashem made successful. Now, Yosef was 18 years old when he went to the prison. And now, 9 years later, Yosef is now 27 years old and he's still in prison. Chapter 40. It happened after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and the baker transgressed. Paro was enraged at his two ministers. Page 219. The chamberlain of butlers and the chamberlain of bakers. And he placed them in the prison. And they remained in the ward for a period of 1 year. Now Yosef is 28 years old. Verse 5. The two of them dreamt a dream. Another dream. And when Yosef came to visit, he saw they're agitated. He asked them, "Why do you appear downcast today?" And they said, "We have a dream and we don't have an interpreter." So he told them, "Relate it to me, if you please." And the butler began, "There was a grapevine in my dream. And on the grapevine there were 3 branches. And it budded and blossomed and clusters ripened. And I took the cluster of grapes and I squeezed them into the cup of Paro." Yosef said to him, "This is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In another 3 days, Paro will bring you back to your post, and you will again serve him his wine." The last line on the page, "If you please, mention me to Paro and get me out of this building." He asked the butler to help him when he is free. And our sages say that because he asked a human being for help instead of asking Hashem for help, he relied on someone other than God, he was punished and he had to remain in prison for another 2 years. Page 221. He explains his request verse 15. For indeed I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing for them to have put me in the pit. Imagine, Yosef feels like such a victim. His brothers went against him and conspired against him, threw him into pit, wanted to kill him, sold him into slavery, into a foreign country. And even there, again they conspired against him for nothing. And they again threw him into prison. For 10 long years he's in prison. He feels there is no way out. I'm already for 10 years in prison. How long can I stay here for? Maybe I'll be here for the rest of my life. The warden of the prison likes my job, so he probably will keep me here forever. I don't want to stay here. So when the chief baker saw that Yosef interprets the dreams so well, he said, I too, in my dream, behold, there were 3 baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all kinds of Paro's food, baker's handiwork. But the birds were eating them from the basket above my head. So Yosef said, this is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are also 3 days. But in 3 days Paro will chop off your head and hang you on the tree, and birds will eat your flesh from you. Such a terrible, terrible dream he had. And the sages ask, what made Yosef interpret this dream so negatively? So some say that actually the chamberlain of bakers mistreated Yosef, and because of that Yosef chose a negative interpretation. And we have a rule that the dreams go after its interpretation. The way you interpret the dreams, that's what the meaning will be, and that's what will happen. As it says in the Talmud, a covenant is made with lips, that whatever lips say, Hashem makes it happen. And Yosef knew this secret. So to the butler who treated him nicely, he gave good interpretation. He wished him well. And to the baker who mistreated him, he gave him negative interpretation. Some say that it wasn't because Yosef was taking revenge. Rather, Yosef saw it in a dream, because he saw that the birds were sitting on top of his head on the basket and eating the food. And he said, birds are usually afraid of people unless they are dead. And from there he understood that in the dream the baker was dead, and that's why birds approached him and ate bread from top of his head. So from there he realized that the baker is destined to die. And some say, a third interpretation, that Yosef understood that the butler really wasn't guilty. The butler served Paro with a beautiful, clean cup of wine. But as Paro was talking to his servants, a fly flew into the cup, and Paro got upset. But it wasn't the butler's fault. It was Paro's fault that he left the cup unattended. So therefore Yosef realized that Paro, after judging the butler, will be merciful to him, because Paro will realize that it wasn't his fault. However, the baker it was his mistake. Paro found a stone in the bread. Stone inside the loaf doesn't happen after it's served. It happens while it's being kneaded. That means the baker didn't do a good job. He wasn't watching the process. He allowed a stone to remain in the dough. So Yosef understood that the mistake of the baker is punishable, and the mistake of the butler doesn't exist. And that is why he understood that the dream is has a negative interpretation. Now, verse 20. And it was on the third day after their conversation. It was Paro's birthday. This is the only birthday mentioned in the Torah. Not birth, but the celebration of a birthday. So Paro made a feast for all his servants, and he appointed the butler back to his post. Verse 21, he restored the chamberlain of the cupbearers to his job. However, verse 22, he hanged the chamberlain of the bakers, just as Yosef had interpreted to them. Yet, what happened later? The chamberlain of the cupbearers did not remember Yosef, but he forgot him. So the double expression means that he didn't want to remember Yosef. He didn't want to save him. So he chose not to remember, not to remind himself. And he forgot means you usually don't forget consciously. That means it was against his will. That means Hashem caused him to forget. As a punishment for Yosef not trusting God, instead trusting flesh and blood, Hashem caused the butler to forget Yosef. And Yosef remained in prison for another 2 years, as we're going to see in next week's Parsha. This concludes this week's Torah portion. As we will see this week and in the coming weeks, there are dreams. In the next week we're going to have Paro's dream. We had the butler's dream, the baker's dream, Yosef's multiple dreams. A lot of dreams, a lot of interpretations. And we will leave it as a separate topic. Why so many dreams? Why specifically now? What do dreams mean? But very often an idea, once it appears in the Torah, it appears multiple times, as if it's bunched up on purpose. And we have to ask ourselves this question: why the idea of dreams is bunched in these weeks? Be it as it may, Parshat Vayeshev is right before Hanukkah. It's preparation. You could say it's the beginning of the dark period, and then the light will appear. Right now it seems it's dark. Yosef is sold. He's in trouble. Yehuda's 2 sons died. He was embarrassed. Yaakov is mourning. He didn't see his son already for 10 years. He's not going to see him for another 2 years. And then for another 10 years. It seems dark time. And out of that dark time, we will see at the end, Parshat Vayigash, all of a sudden light comes. And that's the connection to Hanukkah. Hanukkah happens in the winter, and it happens during the days that are the shortest. Hanukkah falls out on days that are shortest, and the nights are longest. And all of a sudden we see the light. Just like the Greeks, they conquered the Jews, they were oppressing us, not letting us do mitzvot, and it seemed like everything is lost, as if the Jews and the Jewish religion is going to disappear. And all of a sudden, from the ashes, from the darkness comes out great light. Be'ezat Hashem, we should celebrate the holiday of Hanukkah peacefully, and Be'ezat Hashem, we should have a lot of light in our lives, light of Torah, happiness. We should see nachad, pleasure from our children, Be'ezat Hashem, and may we see coming of Mashiach, and we should relight the candles in Beit HaMikdash very soon. Thank you for listening. Shabbat Shalom and Happy Hanukkah.